Hey, welcome back to another episode of Parker's Pensées. I'm your host, Parker Settecase, and this is a podcast where we explore all the deepest ideas in philosophy, theology, nature, and life. I love thinking about cool stuff, so come think with me. This is a very, very special episode. I have with me a returning guest, Michael Tremblay. There's this character from a movie named Ethan Tremblay. And I always think it's not Ethan, it's Michael. I know Michael. Come on. So I'm glad I didn't do it. I wish I didn't bring it up. But if you guys are thinking Ethan Tremblay, then that's not this guy. But you're in good company. He is a Stoic philosopher. He's got his PhD in Stoic philosophy. That was like the topic of his dissertation. I think it was on Epictetus, and we're going to talk about Epictetus today. He's also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and he's been doing that forever as he's been studying Stoicism. So it makes sense that this kind of guy would write a really cool article, philosophy paper on Stoicism and sport. So I'm really excited to talk about sports and Stoicism with him. We're going to go over 10 Stoic ideas for those who just don't even know what Stoicism is. Sometimes I have a hard time remembering what Stoicism actually is. What are the distinctives? Because there's so many different faux Stoics, I would say, out there. Anyways, we're going to jump into that. Before we do, thanks for everyone who is supporting this podcast on Patreon and YouTube members. If you guys like this pod, if it's one of your top 5 or top 10 favorites, please consider becoming a Patreon patron or a YouTube member and support your boy. Help me continue bringing you guys quality stuff like this episode. There are just so many ways that I've commodified myself in order to keep the lights on. You can find all those in the description. I don't want to mention them all, but look in the description and check me out on Substack. I'm doing a lot of stuff over there, a lot of writing, a lot of teaching. It's really fun. And then check out Michael's Substack as well. I'll leave a link to that above mine. And that should be something like the 10 Stoic ideas. That'll be that article. So find that there. All right, let's jump in with some Epictetus, athletics, Stoicism all around, and let's get into it. Michael, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast, man.
Yeah. Hi, Parker. Thanks for having me. Always a pleasure.
Yeah, seriously, dude. Since our first talk, man, I don't remember, maybe 2 years ago, a year and a half ago.
Yeah, a while ago.
You helped me think through so many different things about Stoicism. It's been great. And it's been super cool talking with a bunch of people who are interested in it or who consider themselves Stoics and talking about the difference between New Testament Christianity and Stoicism. And now you're reading the New Testament. I think you're reading Matthew right now, right?
Yeah. I mean, I made it through Matthew, but yeah, reading the New Testament for the first time. We haven't chatted about that, although I did ask your advice about where to start. Really enjoying that. Also just, I never really dug into Christianity at all. And also looking at it as a philosophy of life and as a contemporary to Stoicism as well. I think sometimes people engage with it. I mean, my disposition is just to, wrestle with these ideas, try to pick them apart. And I think maybe some people look at it as something you maybe need to accept or, either fulsome accept and don't question, but it's fun reading it as, I know the context and the time when this was written and when these ideas were being shared and viewing it through that lens and comparing it to other different ways of living. Yeah, it's been a good project. I really enjoyed it. The Sermon on the Mount, that's in Matthew.
Yeah,
that was great. That was really, really enjoyable.
I knew you'd like that, dude. So yeah. I'm so excited for that. I'm excited for you to reflect on it more and get some more thoughts. Maybe I can invite you on just to talk about that because, like you said, you know the other players in that area. And so when I tell Christians, hey, Jesus was actually a philosopher, at least as well. And they're like, how dare you say that? And I was like, well, wait, if you knew what ancient philosophers were like, you'd know what he's doing. And you would just see it that way. And so it's really cool to talk with someone who's immersed in those kind of ideas and say, well, yeah, this is an analog, or this is, closely related to what's going on with these other schools. So it's just fascinating. It's cool to get like a fresh set of eyes on stuff.
I mean, this stuff so much more than me, so feel free to jump in. But I was surprised reading the New Testament how much of it is how explicitly revisionist Matthew is, or at least Matthew's portrayal of Jesus in terms of, here is the Old Testament, or here are the old teachings. Here's how they're being interpreted, and here's how you're getting them wrong, or you're misinterpreting them, or you're being superficial instead of understanding, I guess, maybe the the proper sentiment or the proper ideas behind these teachings, you've kind of you've made them more abstract or superficial than what they were really trying to get at. I think that seems philosophical to me, coming along and really questioning the established norm. And I think that was so fun for me, because you think of Christianity as the established norm now. And I don't think of how much of a change it was and how explicit it was about I'm trying to say radical. I don't know if radical is the right way of thinking about it, but really upending the way people approached religion at the time, or at least Judaism.
Yeah, totally, man. And yeah, and a lot of what Christ was doing is saying, like, here's the letter of the law, and you guys are saying, look, I never cheated on my wife. It's like, yeah, but if you're fantasizing about it every single day, that's all you do. It's as good if you did. Don't go and do it. But look, you're saying you're not an adulterer. All the while, you're addicted to porn. You're you're not a virtuous person just because you haven't stepped across this one boundary. You're not the kind of person you're supposed to be. You're supposed to be representing God. And look at yourselves.
Well, I mean, we'll get to Stoicism in a bit, but that almost felt to me like this movement from consequentialism to kind of like a virtue ethic. Or
that's what I thought too. Yeah.
Okay. So it's like, I didn't kill anybody. As you said, I didn't commit adultery. And as long as I don't do that, it doesn't matter. And it's like, well, these vices are kind of manifestations of issues with your character. And if you have these issues in your character and you just don't go about doing those things either by accident or, I mean, like people would say, maybe you're not powerful enough to do these things, then that's not really any better. Right.
Right.
Yeah. Would you consider Christianity, this is a different topic, but would you consider Christianity virtue ethic, or is that?
It might be a can of worms depending on who you're asking. I think it is, because of what I think Christianity says the nature of the human being is. We're meant to be image bearers of God, and so everything we're supposed to be doing is supposed to represent God as his arbiters on the planet. And so, this is a particular view of sin, but I think this is the right one, that what makes sin so bad is that we're meant to represent God and we're misrepresenting him by lusting after our neighbor's wife, by lying and cheating. And we're saying that this is what God approves of because I'm made in his image. I kick my dog and I'm telling my dog that God's a dog kicker, and it's like, no, we're actually supposed to be the kind of thing that can be arbiters of God's will here on earth. And we're falling short in everything we do. So it's not that a kid stole a pack of gum and it's like, oh, well, God's a stickler and he got you for the one sin. It's like, dude, your whole life is set against the telos that you were made for. So I would say yes. Other Christians might, dude. Yeah. Christians love to fight with each other. We enjoy that.
Yeah. I love that. Well, I love the way that you put it. I also found some pieces quite, I don't know, quite touching. And a lot of Christianity, I didn't grow up religious, and a lot of Christianity, it becomes this kind of, I guess it becomes diluted by people make these references to turning the other cheek, or make these references to, like, he who is out without sin to cast the first stone, or something like this. And then when you actually read it in context, this is actually a pretty affecting story. Like that story of casting the first stone, where I can't remember exactly what she did, but somebody came in.
A woman caught in adultery. Yeah.
Adultery. Yeah. And he was just like, you're all so quick to kind of showcase your righteousness, or trying to be seen as the person carrying out justice. But you're not, there's something kind of, I don't know, sick or sad about that, about the joy of, I don't know, canceling or persecuting somebody. And then the kind of forgiveness he shows her at the end. And it seemed to me, at least the way I read it, as being like transformatively forgiving, where not only is she forgiven, but to be forgiven in that moment, or to be kind of, not punished the way she would have been by the other people, kind of is a real learning moment for her as well. I found that very affecting. There's a lot of great passages.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's so cool. I didn't mean to put you on the spot there, but I'm so glad you had some really good things to say about it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, so I'm going to title this something about Epictetus in sport, or Stoicism in sport. So let's definitely do that, and maybe we can pull back in some Christ stuff too, because I did see in the paper you sent that people have studied Epictetus. He's got like these 3 metaphors or three examples that he uses to teach. One of them being sport, and not a whole ton of people have talked about that. But the ancients have used sport as metaphors for learning all the time. Paul uses this in the New Testament. Yeah, so it's all over the place. It's really cool that you're taking this up, and I think you're the right guy to do it because you're also a sports guy, a martial arts guy. So as we jump in to Stoicism and Epictetus and Olympic athleticism, can you tell us like who is Epictetus?
Yeah. So Epictetus, he's one of the big three Roman Stoics. So typically, when we think about Stoicism, the most popular one is Marcus Aurelius. He wrote the Meditations. He was emperor of Rome, and Seneca is another one of the big three. He was another very rich, influential Roman. He was the emperor or the tutor of the Emperor Nero. And then you have Epictetus, and Epictetus is kind of different from Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, who are very rich, powerful, influential figures in the politics of Rome. And Epictetus was a slave. He's still a well-educated slave, still a slave in a wealthy household, but born a slave. Maybe not born, but a slave at a very young age, and then raised in slavery, grew up a slave, and then eventually achieved his freedom. And then he opened up a school of Stoic philosophy. So he moved to Nicopolis, which is in contemporary Turkey, on the west coast, so close to Greece, and opened up a school of philosophy where he would teach basically young Roman men, people who are going to become successful and important in politics, or Roman life, and he would teach these young men about Stoicism. So a couple differences we see in Epictetus's approach to philosophy is he's a bit more gruff, bit more intense, and I think he kind of takes on this paradigm of this kind of no bullshit athletics coach. I really think he is. He really is trying to whip these students into shape and has them for a couple years to really inspire them, turn them to, if not a life of philosophy, at least to become these powerful, rich people, but still virtuous or attracted to the good. And so what we have from him is his actually his lectures to his students. So his Discourses, which is the main book we have by him, is recordings of lectures that he gave by a student Arian. And so we see there, a student's not paying attention, or a student's not taking it seriously, or maybe a student is showing off to the other students, trying to be a teacher's pet and seeing, look how much I've memorized, or look at all these books I've read. And Epictetus is engaging with that, putting people in their place, pushing back against them. One of his favorite things is to call people slaves. And I think that sometimes people get offended by this because they go from reading Marcus Aurelius, which is very gentle, it's very meditative, and then they switch to Epictetus and they go, oh, this guy's kind of a jerk. But in the context where he's teaching these young men, these people come in, you think of this private high school or something like this, these kids, they're privileged, they've got these kinds of attitudes. And for him, a former slave, to be calling this rich, privileged kid a slave, he's like, you're a slave to your passions, you're a slave to your desires. So, you're worse than these slaves that you look down upon back in Rome. And he's kind of making that kind of comparison and contextualization often. I thought it was cool. The reason I fell in love with Epictetus is because I was in that position. I was the student of Stoicism. I was a young man, probably my early 20s when I got into Stoicism. And that was the voice that I needed. That was the voice that I wanted.
That's awesome, dude. I love that. I love that idea of the tough coach because I started wrestling in first grade and we had tough coaches. They were men that you would admire and look up to, but they'd throw you in a headlock, and you're a little kid, so it feels like they're going super hard and they're not. But that's how I respond. That's what I respond to when someone's giving me that kind of tough love, because I feel it like they're calling me up to something higher. They're like, bro, come on, you're better than that, And it's like, yeah, all right, thanks. You believe in me, but you're still giving it to me tough, and I actually love that. I know not everyone's like that, but that's pretty cool, man.
I think it's a sport thing. There's other people like that too, but I think if you come from sports, you're like, oh, okay, you're doing this because you have my best interest at heart, and I see the value to you not sugarcoating things.
Yeah, Totally. So, I don't know. This is a kind of a random one. Do you know if Epictetus ever like bought citizenship or anything? But did he become a Roman citizen?
Um, oh, I see. My historical knowledge is not as good as I would like it to be. Um, so no, I don't know if he became a citizen or not.
Doesn't
Short
matter
answer.
that much,
Yeah.
but yeah, just a
Well,
curiosity.
I do always want to frame this thing where you raise slave. Obviously there's some, I think when you say slavery, people typically think of this, the American history.
Yeah,
And I
right.
do want to contextualize the fact that like Roman slavery, it had issues, but often if you were in a wealthy house, you'd be educated, you'd teach the children often, you'd be in like a reasonably secure position. So I do want to frame that there's like, it wouldn't have been a life for him where, he was just doing manual labor all the time and had no exposure to
Right.
philosophy. He probably would have been exposed to philosophy in his position as a slave. And then, if he had a relatively nice owner or was in a lucky enough position to kind of graduate out of that after a period of time.
Yeah, totally. It's funny that you make that point because as Christians, we always have to do the same thing because the Greek is doulos. We're slaves of Christ, and we always many of our translators say bond servant. It's not slave because we have this American chattel slavery, which is horrific and crazy and awful. That's based on your race or your ethnicity, I should say, and that's just not what's going on in the New Testament as well.
Mhm.
So, when we say like you're a slave of
Well,
Christ, he's trying to transform that and say like, what would it be like if if your master was a perfectly good God? What would that be like? And it's not even the right kind of slavery, anyways, because man stealing is punishable by death in the Old Testament. So it's not that kind of thing.
yeah. And so Epictetus is, I want to say, born around 40 AD, 60 AD, around this kind of time. So,
Mhm.
that's exactly that kind of New
Yeah,
Testament period.
yeah, that's so cool. All right, so we have Stoicism on the table, and you really helped me last time we talked, or one of the first times maybe we talked about different an article you wrote about different types of stoicism, and there's dollar sign stoicism, which is like people who are just trying to make money using stoic principles and really abusing it. There's broicism, which I'm partial to because I am kind of a bro. I understand where it goes wrong, but I'm like, yeah, broicism is not as bad as dollar sign stoicism. And there's these different kinds, so I thought it'd be really helpful to go over these 10 stoic ideas, 10 distinctives that Stoics cared about. That kind of maybe there's a family resemblance, and there's different kinds because there's ancient Greek Stoicism, which is slightly weirder than Roman Stoicism, which is a little more grounded and maybe
Mhm.
manly or serious or something. So I want to go over these 10 ideas, and we'll continue on with Epictetus and sport. So first up is happiness from your list, and again I'll leave a link in the description. First one on the list is happiness, eudaimonia. Um, can you help us with that? Why do the Stoics
Yeah.
care about happiness?
Yeah. So I wrote this just quick context, meant to be, your kind of Stoicism 101, 10 ideas that build on each other. And if you understand these 10 ideas, you probably understand Stoicism pretty well, whether you agree or not, take it or leave it, but you probably have a pretty good foundation. So the idea with happiness um, is just that the ancient Greek philosophy, Stoicism being one of those, following Aristotle, it was this period where the project of philosophy as a way of life. So the goal of philosophy was to be happy, and then they had different people disagreed about what happiness entailed. People disagreed about what a great life entailed. But the project of philosophy was to have a great life. And so I'm kind of using this interchangeably. People call eudaimonia, which is the Greek term happiness. It mean daimon was like a spirit, like a guardian angel, and eudaimon was to be blessed with, have a good spirit looking over you. It's kind of like a blessed life instead of a cursed life.
Mhm,
Um, and I think the better term for it is flourishing. Just
mhm,
means kind of living the life you want to live. Another way to think about it that Aristotle talks about is, you're walking through a graveyard and you look at somebody and they've died. You look at their grave and you say, oh, that person lived a great life.
hmm,
And what criteria need to be met for you to say that with confidence? And that is really the goal of living, is to have achieved that where someone could accurately say that about your life.
mm.
So it's not necessarily this kind of pleasure based happiness.
Yeah. Another super good one, man. That's super helpful. And there's another analog. Maybe I'll just keep throwing these in
Yeah.
as they come up. But with it, we talked about the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew, and there are the blessings that start off. It's blessed are the peacemakers, blessed are the poor in spirit, and they all sound like, wait, that doesn't actually sound blessed. And it's because he's trying to shift Jesus is trying to shift our perspective, and he uses the word makarios, and so they're Macariisms, but it's a Koine Greek term where I think eudaimonia is all the way from the Attic Greek, a couple 400 years earlier. And but it's the same kind of thing. It's like, here's what the blessed life. Blessed sounds so religious, but it also means happiness or fortunate. Here's what the good
Yeah.
life is. Same thing. It's flourishing. It's living
You don't even,
according to the natural principles and how to actually live well.
yeah, what you would want for your kid. Like, you don't need to overcomplicate it too much.
Mm,
It's just, like what you would want for someone you loved. You'd
yeah.
want them to live well.
Mm.
Yeah. So that's the idea.
It's super good. I think that's cool too to note that Stoicism is a philosophy of life. It's thrown around a lot. Analytic philosophers get all goofy about, "Oh, this isn't a philosophy of life, Hakuna Matata stuff." It's like, man, ancient philosophy was about how to live a good life, how to live well, and not even in the abstract notion, but like you said, like how do I want my children to live today and tomorrow, and how do I want to? What are the principles of the world that will help me best live? And how can I live in accordance with those principles?
Well,
Um,
whoa, well, we're going to dig into this so much. We're not going to get to the philosophy and sport part, but, we should do a Christianity versus ancient Greek, religion thing here, because I'd be interested in your view on Christianity about this, because, another conception that Plato was really into and Socrates was really into is actually philosophy as a preparation for death, or
Hmm.
living well as a preparation for death.
Yeah.
And so a preparation for the moment when your soul leaves your body, that you're as prepared as possible to transition into the afterlife. So that's another way of viewing it, whether that's just like living well until we die. The Stoics didn't believe in an afterlife in that way. They didn't think our souls carried on. So whether that's just, living well over the course of your life, or whether that's living well to prepare for the next stage, that's not understanding abstract arguments, right? That's putting them into practice. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's good, man. So next up we have virtue. Maybe I can just list them because they do really build. I mean, you did a great job of building them on to each other. So let me list them, and you can kind of talk about the flow of them. So next up is we have happiness. Then we have virtue, arete, which is like excellence. It's the secret to the good life. If you want to be happy, then you need to be virtuous. But after that, we have knowledge, and not this is the really tricky one for modern listeners. Knowledge is like the excellence of the rational animal, and you did a good job. You talked about fish. Like, how do you know? How do we judge fish? Like, well, how well do they swim? Because that's kind of their property. That's one of their essential properties. Well, how do you know what a good human is? Well, are they knowledgeable? Because that's the kind of thing that we are. Then you have live accordance with nature. I kind of want to say the Greek, but it's kata fusin Zane, I think I want to say, but that's all Koine pronunciation anyways. Live in accordance with nature. Then you have mindful attention. So pay attention to what you think about, and then pay attention to how you're thinking. Impression and assent. I love this one. This is so cool. Impressions are like we our filtering of the world through our mind, and then assent is choosing which ones are right and which ones are wrong, false impressions or true impressions. 7 is the things that are up to us. There's this dichotomy of control. You have some things that are up to you and some things that are not up to you. And the only things that are good or bad are those things that are within your control, that are up to you to choose from. Then there's the ruling faculty and the faculty of choice. Our minds are our fundamental identity. I think I actually love this because I'm a substance dualist. So I'm like res cogitans from Descartes. It's like that you're a thinking thing, and he may not have had feelings and actions associated with that, and if he didn't, then he's wrong. But yeah, that's what you are, maybe most fundamentally your mind. 9, indifference, things that are not up to us, like money and power and how other people perceive us. And then 10 is harmful passions and good emotions. So emotions are split into what is it? Pathe and eupatheia. Yeah, there we go. So good emotions and passions. Maybe I got some of that wrong. I hope you're keeping
Yeah.
track here, but they all build on each other. So cool.
Yeah, so let me take a. I mean, I think you did a good job there. So
Thanks, man.
I did something right, writing that. So let me take a swing at that. So first one is, I'll kind of go over what you did again,
Yeah.
re-summarize. First one's happiness. So the goal of life is happiness. Then it's like, well, how do you become happy? What does happy mean? Because I see, this person's trying to become rich. This person's trying to become famous. This person is dedicating their life to religion. This person is dedicating their life to their career. Who's right? What's the best way to be happy? The Stoic answer to that is that happiness is achieved by virtue, and virtue just means excellence. So in the really abstract sense, not even moral virtue, just being excellent. So being an excellent person. And the distinction there is between the Stoic stance. The really, really important point there that differentiates the Stoics from others is they say that it's really not about external circumstances.
Yeah.
It's about, if you are excellent, even if you were born into a terrible circumstance, even if you got sick, even if your house burns down, even if everybody hates you, you still had a good life. You still were happy. And that's kind of a controversial claim. They say famously that the sage, the perfect Stoic, would be happy on the torture rack.
Yeah.
Which would say you'd still, and when I think about that, I think, you'd look at that person on the torture rack and you'd be like, that's a great person. You'd still think that. You'd still say that's a great life, even though they're suffering and being tortured, because they are an excellent person. And then the next part is knowledge. So it's like, what is excellence? Is excellence, I'm really good at sports? Is excellence, I'm really kind of crafty and knowledgeable? Is it me being very kind? They say, well, excellence is knowledge, because when we ask what it means to be an excellent person, you already made this analogy. It means we have to understand what a person is. We judge things in relation to what they were made to do, and the Stoics take that stance. They think things have functions. They were made for certain causes, and humans are thinking things. That's what sets us apart from other creatures. It's what we can do uniquely. And so to be an excellent person is to think well. And in other words, that is to understand ourselves, understand our place in the universe, understand what's good and bad, understand what kind of choices are the right choices to make and which choices are the bad choices to make. And where that leads to, so what does it mean to have knowledge? Well, it means to live in accordance with nature. So what's the kind of consequence of having knowledge? Is you live in accordance with nature. And what living in accordance with nature means, it just means that you have a smooth flow of life, the Stoics would say. So there's no friction. So they look at somebody and the person says, oh, I wish I was born into a different body, or I wish I was born with different talents, or I wish I looked different, or I wish, I was hired for that job, or I didn't get sick, or something like this. And you kind of become out of alignment with the way things are. There becomes a friction between how you see the world, what you want the world to be, and the way the world actually is. And so the Stoic idea is that when you have knowledge, when you understand yourself, you understand your place in the world, you understand your function, you understand how the fact that you have the ability to fulfill that function because you have the ability to achieve knowledge, we're all born with that, then we don't really have that kind of friction with the world. And so we live this smooth life. And that's where that idea of, I'll get to passions at the end, but that's where that idea of being Stoic is. Stoic is not about, even today I see well-meaning people talking on the internet, being Stoic is about recognizing you have an emotion and not letting it control you. And it's like, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not why Stoics aren't emotional. Stoics aren't emotional because they think that the major fluctuation of life, the ups and downs, come from false judgments, come from attaching our conception of happiness to things that we don't have control over or can change a lot. And so if you're not happy with the world as it is, if you're not living in accordance with nature, you're gonna have a lot of fluctuations in your day-to-day happiness, or your day-to-day, I should say, kind of joy or sorrow. So I'm moving through these pretty fast, but that's
that's good. Can I ask a question on that? So, I wonder, just real quick, this one's maybe fun. Is dyeing your hair not living in accordance with nature?
Yeah, so I mean, this is interesting. Like, Epictetus has these really famous passages where he was like, if someone said you got to cut off your beard, I would rather die than cut off my beard, because the
I I,
beard is
I
this.
feel that with my mustache, so I totally get it. Yeah.
Because the beard is the sign of the philosopher, right? And he's like,
Mm,
I'm not gonna change who I am. Um, I don't mean to be a cop out. The Stoics here allow for personal choice and self-expression. That's fine. I think it depends on why you're dyeing your hair. If
yeah.
you want to dye your hair because you want other people to like you and you want to fit in, I think the Stoics are going to kind of say, that's a dangerous road to go down, because where does it stop, right?
Yeah, I was thinking
Um,
mostly like dyeing grays to look younger. You
oh,
don't
to
you
look
don't like
younger.
the you don't like the flow of nature. Hey, that's the nature of things,
Oh
man. You
yeah,
get
no, I
old,
think
right?
I think that's probably unstoic.
Mm,
Just I mean, again, it comes to the Stoic reason. It's always going to be the why, right?
yeah,
If you're dyeing your hair because you're afraid of death and you're trying to ignore it for a couple more years or a couple more decades and you're in denial, yeah, that's a problem.
mm,
If you're dyeing your hair because you're trying to fulfill your role of being a caregiver to your family, and you think you're more likely to get hired for the job if you're looking your
mhm.
best, that's totally fine. Yeah, totally dye your hair. That's
That's
great.
cool. That's a good. Yeah, it's about the intentions. It's about the why. That's good, dude. And then I'm wondering if the nature, living in accordance with nature, um, is that where you're putting the logos doctrine, like the doctrine of God and nature? Is that in there with that, or
Yeah,
is
yeah.
that
So
a
God,
different
I mean,
principle?
they're all interconnected. So I try to build them so they build on each other, but you kind of have to jump between them.
Sure.
I mean, logos is it's the divine principle that imbues all things. So Stoics are providential. They
Hmm.
think that the universe is unfolding towards a rational design, and so the Stoic argument is going to be, you have a role to play in this universe that is as good as it could be, and so you need to align yourself with that role, try to understand it as quickly as possible, and play it as well as possible. And the two metaphors here. One metaphor is that you're being dragged by a cart, which is fate, and you can either be kicking and screaming, or being dragged along the mud by the neck, or you can be walking alongside the cart. Either way, the cart is going to pull you along.
Mm,
You have this freedom over your reaction to the path you're taking and the
mhm,
way you engage with that path. That's one part. So there's kind of like this emotional aspect to living in accordance with nature, which is just the fact that you'll be happier. Um, Another part is this sense of like meaning and purpose. And they use another metaphor that the foot, something Epictetus says, that the foot would gladly get muddy if it understood itself to be part of the body.
mhm,
And it's this idea that
mm,
when you see yourself in isolation, any sort of hardship or challenge you endure, you think, well, why couldn't I have just not been muddy? Like, why couldn't I just have not had any hardship or challenge? But if you see yourself as part of a greater plan or greater
yeah.
process, nature, then you have some context and meaning to those kind of struggles that you endure.
Dude, that is so beautiful, actually. I often talk about, and this is not original to me, but about a tapestry, because we're talking about,
Hmm.
as Christians, we believe we're providential. We believe in God's providence. I'm a Calvinist, so I believe in divine determinism, which is compatible, I think, with human action as well. But I'm even wearing a cage-free Calvinist shirt. So that cage-free means like if when you first become a Calvinist, it's all you want to talk about. It's like if someone first discovers Stoicism, it's like shut up, you can't talk about it for a year at least. You have
Yeah.
to actually go read the stuff. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm a Stoic, I'm a Calvinist." So we say you have to lock them in a cage. They're in the cage stage, and then they can be free once you are, and then eventually get to the sage stage, which is a nice little another connection with you guys. But so we also believe in providence, and we often talk about a tapestry. Hey, look, you're why would God allow me to go through this? What's up with all the suffering? And it's like, yeah, you're looking at the backside of the tapestry and you're seeing all these interwoven threads, and they're all loose and you don't see the picture. But there's coming a time where you're going to flip it around and you're going to find that your threads actually are in a beautiful tapestry with all the other ones. Or think of a novel, and it's like, man,
Mhm.
what's going on? I don't see the thing. It's like, yeah, because you're in the novel, you're in the story, you're narratively situated. You don't get to see the full picture. And I love that with the foot. I need to read that and incorporate that more. That's beautiful.
Yeah, lots of good points about this. Kierkegaard has a line about how life can only be understood backwards, but it has to be lived forwards.
Yeah,
And
right.
just that taking that perspective. I think about the Buddhist idea of the second arrow.
Mm.
Are you familiar with this one?
No, I'm not.
It's like when something happens to you, that's the first arrow. When you add these negative judgments, you get down on yourself, you pathologize it.
Yeah.
That's the second arrow. And it's like
Mm.
the first arrow is out of your control. The second arrow is self-inflicted. And so
Ooh, that's
Buddhism's
good.
always about kind of avoiding the second arrow.
Yeah.
And Seneca has the point of we suffer more in imagination than reality.
Yep.
We're getting a little bit out of context here about, don't double your sorrows unnecessarily. But one of the Stoic ways to eliminate that is that connection with the providential
Yeah.
universe. Yeah. Or, not everybody is religious and not everybody approaches Stoicism religiously, but even if you're not providential, contextualizing things, as you said, within the narrative of your life, expanding the time scale,
Yeah.
expanding the time horizon. What lesson is this teaching me? What insight is this giving me that will be beneficial later?
Mm.
Those things are, again and again, this is the Stoic view with knowledge, right?
Yeah.
These are not tricks. These are
Mhm.
not ways of deluding yourself. These are all true. And
Yeah.
so you're feeling better because you're getting closer to the truth. You're not feeling better because you're plugging yourself into the matrix or something like this.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's right, man. And something about impression and assent, I think, is really, really, really helpful. And I think others have said it as well, but I think the Stoic language for it is just so helpful that
Mhm.
it's almost kind of sounds a little bit like Kant's emphasis about transcendental idealism. You have this framework in your head, your cognitive faculties, and they're filtering different things. Um, we have these impressions that are coming to us. I like the way they talk about it a little bit more than Plato, because Plato's like, you can't really know anything except the forms. Stoics are like, look, you're getting these some impressions, and then you adjudicate: are they true or are they false? And if they're true, you assent to them, and then you live accordingly. And if they're false, you don't assent to them. Um, it's so helpful. The second arrow thing is really helpful too. But I think about this with my wife all the time. We talked about this a little bit beforehand. My wife doesn't let me. She doesn't care a whole ton about philosophy. Sometimes I can make it applicable to her. But when we were going through infertility for like 4 years trying to get pregnant, and she'd be like, "I know this isn't going to work because it didn't work last time, and because of this and this and this." And I'm like, "Here's where a little epistemology actually can go a long way if I don't bring out a Bayesian equation and ruin her life." But I don't think you actually you can't make that judgment on this. We don't have enough information. We have to hold off judgment. And actually, if you don't hold off judgment, you're just going to stress yourself out, and your body may reject all the stuff that we've been doing. So if anything, stressing over it could make it worse. Now,
Mhm.
don't stress, it's going to stress her out. But using some of these kind of principles to say, hey, you actually don't know that. And so you need to withhold judgment right now. And that's the best thing that you can do. It's not a trick. It's not it's just being honest with yourself. You don't have that much knowledge. You don't know everything. And a few times it actually worked super duper well and was able to like be that philosophy as therapy that the ancients thought it was, which is cool. It
Mhm.
didn't always work, but sometimes it did.
Well, this is the skeptical position, right? We don't often talk about skepticism as an ancient school of life anymore,
Mhm.
but this was the skeptical position:
Yeah.
is that we suffer because of certainty or because of the illusion of certainty. We don't
Yeah.
actually have certainty, and maybe that certainty is about like, oh, I know this bad thing's going to happen, but the certainty could be hope. I know this good thing's going to happen,
Yeah.
and then I'm incredibly disappointed when it doesn't. And so this skeptical position is we suspend these judgments because that's where our suffering comes from.
Mhm.
The Stoic position is builds on skepticism and says, well, we then adjudicate carefully, as you said, and we allow back in the ones that we know are true.
Mhm.
We're, God has given us the capacity to tell some things are true, to
Mhm.
trust our common senses and to deliberate carefully and come to some judgments with certainty. And if it's one of those, you can believe that. I can say there's a table in front of me. I can say, we're having a conversation. I don't have to be in this like total suspension of knowledge all the time. But so much of our suffering comes from these judgments. The Stoics would say value judgments, or even knowledge claims that we think we have, but we don't.
Mm.
So skepticism first is definitely a Stoic idea.
Yeah. And it's so cool when you you've helped me with this, but I've also since then I've been studying some more of the history of just other ancient schools and stuff, and seeing that Stoics wanted to connect themselves back to Socrates,
Mhm.
and the skeptic school said, "Hey, we're doing what Socrates did," and so we're like, "Oh, skeptics are bad," and like, no, we're trying to uphold the legacy of Socrates. What are you talking about? And then you have Diogenes, who's like Socrates gone mad, doing all sorts of crazy stuff, but he's got a point on a lot of things. He sounds nuts sometimes, and he tries to. But I mean, he said this thing like, "Hey, maybe it was a quote about Diogenes, but it was like he only called humans who knew a lot about like the human condition or something like that." And he's
Mm.
like, it sounds weird because you're like, that's really dehumanizing. And he's like, well, I call an archaeologist because they know about archaeology. Everything that every human thing, we call them that because they know about that. So if you don't even know what it means to be a human, then I'm not going to call you a
Yeah.
human. And it's like, all right, you could use that for really gross ways, but it's at least a fascinating point to think about.
Well, it would be it's the craft analogy, right? Which is living well as a craft,
Mm,
like any other. And if you're an archaeologist, we call you a doctor or an archaeologist is because we're giving you a title of respect based on your mastery of the craft. And so if someone hasn't dedicated themselves to the craft of living well and thinking carefully about what it means to be a person, then we don't give them that title. Is the way that I read it.
mm,
I'm not familiar with the passage, but makes sense. And then interesting point on Epictetus. So for those listening, I mean, Diogenes the Cynic, he's the really famous one, lived in the barrel, defecated in public, has all these famous anecdotes.
yeah.
But the two most mentioned people in Epictetus's discourses are Socrates and Diogenes.
Mm,
And Stoicism actually comes from cynicism. So the founder of Stoicism, Zeno, was a student of one of the students of Diogenes the Cynic. So, and then Epictetus looks at Diogenes as really the sage, really the ideal Stoic, and people sometimes call Epictetus' Stoicism for that harder edge to it. They call it this kind of cynical Stoicism, because what Epictetus says, he says that's a person whose job it is to just do philosophy.
mm,
Most people, their job is to not just do philosophy. They have to be a parent, they have to be a neighbor,
mm.
they have to work a job, they have to participate in politics. We can't all just be philosophers because everything would fall apart.
Yeah.
But some people have a calling. That's like Socrates, who was very annoying and people didn't like Socrates. That's like Diogenes. Some people have a calling to just be philosophers, and they're like a special few.
Mm.
So he actually puts them on a pedestal in a way that a Seneca or Marcus Aurelius wouldn't.
Yeah, that's really that's great. Um, well, so we got a little bit about Stoicism. We could talk about more about these principles, but it'd be really helpful for the listener who wants to know more. Just read the article that Michael wrote up because it's all there in black and white, clear as crystal. So I want to jump in just a little bit about Epictetus and his use of sports and sports analogy. Oh man, my handwriting's too bad, so I can't pronounce this guy's name, but it looks like Pan
Yeah,
T
Panetius.
Panetius. Nice. Oh, it's a U. Okay, cool. Thanks, dude. One more time.
Panetius.
Panetius. So he compares Pancration, the Pancration athlete, to the Stoic. I just grabbed that. Pancration, for those who don't know, is like ancient MMA. It was
Yeah.
probably
Well,
it probably is the name of the sport. It just they called it mixed martial arts so it could be approved in the United States.
I love the etymology stuff. I'm sure you do too.
Mhm.
Where Kratos is power, and then
Yeah.
Pan is everything.
Yeah.
So it's the martial artist who's strong at everything is
Yeah.
pancration. So it is
So
like it is
good.
the MMA.
So good. And he says that the Pancration athlete is like the Stoic. And I mean, that was a tiny little quote in your longer paper, but do you have any like how so?
Yeah.
How could that be?
Well, Marcus Aurelius makes another line here where I'm always like because I started in jiu-jitsu, I'm always like hyper focused any sort of sport metaphor or
Yeah.
comparison.
Hmm.
Marcus Aurelius has another line where he says that the a philosopher, the Stoic, is more like the pancrationist than the fencer because our tools are a part of us. They're
Yeah.
not something we pick up and put down. It's like it's part of who we are
Yeah.
as
I think
a person, essentially.
I think he also says not a dancer, but a wrestler at some point. And because I was
Yeah,
a
yeah.
wrestler, I have to do that
I
too.
mean, this is the same.
Yeah.
This is the same passage, just different. Oh no, maybe it's
No,
a
it's
different one if
different.
it's the
I think they're
dancer.
two
If it's
different
dancer.
ones.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, cool.
which is awesome. Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, and so, big question. I think in a couple ways. I think one is that the Stoics think that living well is a craft. That's something we've already talked about.
Hmm.
And so they have this major admiration for people that do other crafts, people that are expert at other skills. So one way the Stoic is like the Pancratian fighter is just that they're both experts at their craft.
Hmm.
They've both dedicated themselves to a long-term transformative project. They've dedicated themselves to a transformative project that was incredibly difficult and a transformative project that is I would say all encompassing,
Yeah.
right? So the athlete thinks about how they eat. Am I eating in a way that's going to contribute to my Olympic gold? Am I sleeping in a way that's going to contribute to my Olympic gold? Am I spending time around friends and family who are supportive of this goal? And the Stoic needs to be the same way and is also like this.
Hmm.
And so that's one aspect of this analogy between Stoicism and sport. Another aspect of the analogy between Stoicism and sport is that um, the Stoics, I think, admired the athletes in particular because of their capacity to um, recontextualize adversity,
Hmm.
recontextualize hardship. So, Epictetus has these explicit passages where he says, imagine you've got an easy life and you're complaining about this hard day you had. It's like, imagine a wrestler in a room and they were better than everybody. And, everything was easy. They'd be upset. They'd be like, come on, coach, you got to give me, like, I can't learn anything with
That's
these
right.
kids.
That's
There's
right.
nothing for me. And then the coach brings, they bring in some recruit and he's giving them a hard time. And the wrestler is going to be like, oh, thank you. Thank you for bringing in. This guy's kicking my butt, but that's exactly what I needed to get
Hmm.
better.
Hmm.
And so athletes are really attuned to the transformative nature of hardship, the beneficial nature of hardship, and the kind of the gratefulness to hardship. The Epictetus asks us to think of God as a wrestling coach
Hmm.
who has partnered us up with some tough young man for the training session.
Wow.
And if we take that perspective, then we're in a position to say, okay, well, I'm going to learn what I'm bad at today. I'm going to learn where I need to improve.
Hmm.
And I might have a chance to strengthen or practice some of the techniques I've been working on.
Hmm.
And so, these are things that athletes are really, really good at and really comfortable doing as part of their craft. So I think that's stage one is this actual this admiration for the craft of sport and saying, look, philosophers could learn a thing or two from that.
Yeah, I really like that. I like the Pancratian analogy too because of needing to be well rounded.
Yeah.
Because like if you're only a striker and you have no grappling, that you may get exposed here. And so you should be you can't be amazed. You can't everything can't be your strength, but you have to be well rounded enough. And if you have an area of weakness, you need to work on that. And there's different philosophies on that too. Like, well, just maximize your best strengths. It's like, yeah, but you're gonna get exposed here and there. So I like that when I think about virtues because I think a lot of us have proclivities towards certain virtues that we're just like, man, I want that one. But
Mm-hmm.
self-control, no way, dude. Or self-control over pornography use. But it's really easy to just buy stuff on eBay. Stuff it's like it's so easy for us to compartmentalize. But thinking about, hey, your
Yeah.
philosophy of life needs to be well-rounded as well. Like you need to be pursuing virtue, not individual virtues.
Yeah. And this is this is what I do. I read new books and then I internalize some of the lessons. So this is from Matthew as well, I think,
Hmm.
where there's a bit of a jump, but I remember this part where Jesus was saying, he's like, everybody loves, you can't just be love your family because everybody loves their
Hmm.
family. Like,
Yeah.
can't just be like love the people you like because everybody loves the people you like.
Mhm.
You got to love the people you don't like as well.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, that's so true. And then I'm taking that point. You can't just do the things you're good at. Everybody likes doing the things they're good at.
Right.
It's like everybody likes finding their strength and just like leaning into that. You've got to be honest about your weaknesses.
Mhm.
Not to push the metaphor too far. Otherwise you'll be like those people from the early UFCs and all they can do is punch or, all they can do is just jujitsu and, they get beat up for it.
Yeah. No, that's great, man. And the sports stuff, people people often ask people often ask me like, "Hey, are you a Stoic?" I'm like, "Dude, I don't even know what to say about something like that." But a lot of the Stoic principles resonate with me because I wrestled my whole life, and because a lot of the actual philosophy that we learn was in the room, from a coach who learned it from his coach, who learned it from his coach, who learned it from him. And I don't know how far back it goes, but it goes back into like catch wrestling in England. And that goes back, who knows if you believe the mythology or whatever, maybe all the way back to Japan, which maybe goes back. And probably everyone's wrestling in some folk style in their different cultures all the way back and from when we first could start wrestling.
Mhm.
So those are like life principles. Those are like life lessons that men have been teaching other men through wrestling, through sports, through combat. And hey, look, it's just you out there, man. I've got your back in here. Iron sharpens iron. We need to grow together. But at the end of the day, it's you. And so you have to take responsibility for this kind of stuff. And if you want to be really good, you have to run up that hill. I don't want to run up that hill. Well, then you're not going to be good.
Mhm.
Like go do the hard things and choose the hard way in order to make yourself sharper and better. And so you can be a better teammate for your other teammates. And as you guys sharpen one another, you'll all get sharp.
Mhm. Well, this is what Bertrand Russell. Have you read the history of Western philosophy with Bertrand Russell?
A little bit. I haven't read
A
the
little
whole
bit.
thing enough. Yeah.
His Stoicism passage, like one way of reading Stoicism that's less charitable. Like I consider myself a Stoic. I try to live it. I'm not perfect. I think there's some things maybe I disagree with here and there, but it's certainly the one that resonates with me the most. I take it seriously,
Yeah.
and I think one way to read Stoicism that's charitable but disagrees with it is to say it's kind of it's an operating system that is developed to deal with like really really hard situations,
Hmm.
and so it's kind of like a survival mechanism. It's more pragmatic than it is true.
Hmm.
It's a way of thinking that just like, if you were a slave, if you were the kind of person that was going to have to fight in a war, if you were the kind of person who many of your kids would die before you, um, how would we as humans survive? And we would probably gravitate towards some of these Stoic ideas about focusing on what's up to you, preparing yourself for adversity. This really kind of trying not to have these extreme fluctuations with grief and things like this. And so I think there's some truth to that. And when I hear about the stoicism of the wrestling room, that's kind of what I hear, which is
Hmm.
like if we want wrestling's incredibly incredibly hard,
Hmm.
um, much harder than jiu-jitsu in my view, at least in the way that's practiced in most rooms in the country. And if you want to survive and succeed in those spaces, these are like pragmatically some good tools
Hmm.
to adopt. I think there's a lot of value to those tools. I think a lot of young men or really anybody can benefit from having more of those. That's kind of separate from the life philosophy. But
Hmm.
the point that I think you made is that it really attunes people to be receptive to the life philosophy when they're older, or
Yeah.
a lot of it seems like common sense if you've gone through hard things or you've gone through whether that's sport or otherwise. There's this lovely passage by Masonius Rufus. So Epictetus's teacher was Masonius Rufus,
Hmm.
who was a really kind of hardcore Stoic in Rome. And he has this passage where he's talking about a Spartan, and he's teaching people like, don't, you think pleasure is good, but we shouldn't associate pleasure with good. Don't tie those so closely together. And like the young Spartan teenager is like, but Masonius, isn't pain good? Like isn't pain the thing that we want and should pursue? And Masonius is just kind of like, whoa. He's like, you're wrong, but you're going to be such an easier person to teach stoicism to.
Ha.
Like
Yeah.
you're so much more prepared for philosophy than
Hmm.
the person who's attached to pain and is kind of like, I'm going to train as hard as I can. I'm going to pursue the most difficult thing I can find to do. That kind of wrestler athlete mindset a lot of the time. Stoic is going to say that's not right because virtue is the good,
Hmm.
but way easier to teach you than someone who's had a kind of soft upbringing.
Mm. That's good, man. I really like that. Yes, definitely all that, everything you said. Yes. It's actually hard. So I work with college wrestlers still, in my Christian ministry. And a lot of times it's the last couple years of preparing them for the business world and saying like, hey, just so you know, people operate by different ethics out there in the business world, and there's not a whole bunch of honor and virtue, and people do abuse their situation, even though they're tiny and wimpy. They'll treat you like an abusive way, in an abusive way, but you can't tackle them through the wall. And so it's really confusing because they're acting like they're going to be physical with you, and they're not going to be, but they're using their authority to abuse you. And it's really weird because we don't do that kind of thing ever. You've never done that your whole life. So just so you know, get ready for it. And it's such a weird thing because it's like, well, they're not children. It's like, I understand, but they've lived in the wrestling room. I lived in the wrestling room, and it's just weird when you're confronted by someone who has a completely different ethic than you, built on abusing civilization's laws, charity, I guess, and saying like, you can't hit me, so I'm going to treat you very poorly. It's like, man, this is so weird. This is just different than what, you talk smack on someone, you can go wrestle them right there. You can't do that anymore. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm psychologizing myself a little bit, or outing myself. I wanted to talk about the nature of the good actually really quick, because I'm not super clear on this. I know, so like Boethius is interacting with Stoicism. Some people call him the last Roman philosopher. And he identifies the good with happiness, or happiness is just the highest good of a rational animal, of a rational being. I wonder what Stoics want to identify themselves as the lineage of Socrates. Socrates probably had some idea of the good. Maybe a lot of that was Plato, maybe not. But I'm sure that the Stoics talk about the good. Do they think? They believe in a corporeal reality, that everything's physical, I believe, but is there a highest actual form of the good, or is it just recontextualized as happiness? Do you have any idea on what the Stoics thought about, like, the nature of the good?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I understand your question. So I'll take a swing at it and then
Yeah.
course correct if necessary. So good is good for something or
Okay.
someone. And so the definition of the good is that which is always beneficial.
Mm.
And so then there's kind of an epistemological exercise of like, well, what is always beneficial? Is money always beneficial? No, because some people get rich and it corrupts them. Is health always beneficial? Well, no, because we wouldn't want a really strong, adept serial killer who's just able to go and murder people
Yeah.
more adeptly because of their strength. So you have these kinds of, you do this process of elimination and you end up with virtue. It's like nobody's life is ever worse for virtue. That's the only thing that is always worth selecting. There's some controversy that maybe, genuine friendship is also in that category. There's maybe some other kind of fringe examples, but really it's that. So the good is that which always benefits. That's good for humans.
Okay.
Now, I think you're kind of referring to good in maybe a more abstract sense. I mean, there is reason and logos. And so some of these things get kind of like overlapped with each other, right? Because the good is the thing that always benefits you. What always benefits you? Well, it's virtue, which is knowledge, which is aligning yourself with the logos, which is aligning yourself with the providential nature of the world. So these things, it kind of, I think you're kind of talking about that bigger, like capital G good. And the Stoics don't really use that kind of language or talk about it in that way, but they do align them. But you align yourself with kind of the reason of God pretty quickly, because that's in practice what it means to have a good life, is to achieve that alignment.
Yeah, I think that makes perfect sense. Yeah, and I love the way that you abstracted out to it, because I think that sounds right. And it is fascinating. Boethius does that same thing where he identifies the logos with the good, with God, and then that's the source of happiness, being in alignment with that. And then he kind of, I think he wants to, maybe he's even reacting against Stoicism, but I'm only saying this because I'm actually reading that book with my Substack audience right now.
Yeah.
We're reading through the Constellation Philosophy.
I really have to read it. I've been seeing your Substack posts. They've been inspiring me. The person that introduced me to Stoicism was this philosophy professor in undergrad, and that was his favorite book. He was like,
"Oh, nice, dude!
This is the best philosophy book ever written." I probably did read a passage of it, back in second year or something, but I should dive back into it.
Definitely. Yeah. I think you would. This might be the perfect time too, because now you're reading a little bit of the New Testament, so you'll see what Boethius is talking about. But that's all awesome. I've taken us so far a stream, dude. I'm sorry. We went all over the place here. Um, so w- I would love to talk just briefly. I mean, we already kind of touched on it, but Epictetus, his philosophy of sport is later in the paper, maybe like the fourth section. Athletes are like an exemplar of resilience for people, and w- maybe you could talk about the role that resilience plays in stoicism. You've talked about how it's kind of like a survival
Yeah.
thing, but how is it that athletes are an exemplar for resilience, and how can a modern stoic appreciate that and apply that to their own lives?
Yeah. I mean, so I think there's two. Maybe I go into a slightly different version of the paper. We were talking about this before when you write something and you kind of, you,
Yeah.
you get it out of your head and then you're like, but I think this will be close enough. Um, Two things that athletes do really well. I think one is they make us or good athletes at least. They're able to differentiate between training and competition,
Hmm.
and they don't get discouraged by training. So I think that's one thing we really need to do a good job of in our own lives and learn as Stoics is like, does this situation really matter? Or is this ego? Because if this situation doesn't really matter, then I should be failing as much as possible. I should be learning as much as possible. I should be pushing myself as much as possible. There's going to be moments where it really matters. Do I have courage? Do I have the kind of wisdom I need to show up for my family and my loved ones? Was I able to kind of do the difficult thing when either I needed to do it or people needed me? Those I think of as competition.
Mm.
But so much of our life is just training, and so the if you treat everything like it's competition, you're gonna be stressed all the time. If I had to wrestle every day and put on my singlet and get on the mat every day for competition, I'd be like I need a break. But making that differentiation, I think, is really really helpful. Um, Another thing that athletes are really good at is they understand. Epictetus makes this metaphor. They understand how to play the ball, which he means is that in any situation they say, okay, well, what's the thing that I have control over, that I can influence, that is most influential to the outcome,
Mm.
and I'm going to kind of keep my mind, my flow. I'm going to try to achieve a flow state where I keep my mind on that. So if I'm a soccer player, basketball player, I'm not saying, oh, it's our team is losing, or oh, I'm tired, or the ref is like being really unfair today. This is me, my eyes getting off the ball. What I need to keep my mind on the ball, which is to say, okay, where do I need to position myself to be in the best position? What play do I need to make? What information do I need to share with my teammates or individually? If we go back to wrestling, it's just I'm not thinking about the fact that I'm losing. That sucks. I'm not thinking about this person's higher ranked than me. I'm not
Yeah.
thinking about the bad call that got made 3 minutes ago. I say, what's the play I need to make? What's the takedown I need? How many points do I need to get? I'm keeping my mind in that moment. And so there's a resiliency aspect to that. I mean, there's both a pragmatic aspect, and that's like a really effective way to live, but it's also less emotionally tumultuous because
Mm.
there is no value judgment. There is only just a kind of flow of craftsmanship,
Mm.
kind of just performing the sport, and there's not frustration until you lose focus on the ball. That's when
Yeah.
you get frustrated or upset. So I think those are two other kind of lessons there.
That's really helpful. So I want to ask about practice in daily life because it's super easy for me to understand even practicing virtue or practicing stoic principles in the context of sport. I totally understand that. But I wonder about practicing it in everyday life and how to do that. Before we go there, I wonder about um, eupatheia, good emotions.
Hmm.
A lot of my dudes and friends who are into wrestling or who are wrestlers who are into stoicism, they think I don't even want to celebrate. So I'm not going to react to a bad call because I'm workmanlike. I'm going to be about business. I'm going to keep my eye on the prize or eye on the ball. And then when they win, especially a big man, one of my friends is a national champion. Um, it's like, bro, you should probably celebrate this. You should probably show some emotion. You should probably be affected by this and let some of that out. What do you think about eupatheia and celebrating celebrating wins in an appropriate. Can you celebrate in a virtuous way, or is it all showboating or something? Maybe.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good question. I think that it all comes back to why, like
Yeah.
everything else.
Mm.
We're not, as Epictetus would say, we're not all Socrates. So, there will be the perfect person out there. The perfect Stoic is the person that would win the match and be like, I'm happy that I got the opportunity to perform. They would lose the match. They'd be like, I'm happy I got the opportunity
Yeah.
to perform.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'd be
Sure.
the same.
Yeah.
We are not perfect Stoics. And so the Stoic risk is when you attempt to, you actually don't connect with how you're feeling and what matters to you because you're trying to emulate or you're trying to externally display the right thing, or you're trying to force yourself into that box. I think the Stoic approach is to like feel what you're feeling and then, then interrogate it, question it, and, put the work in if you think it's not the right thing to be feeling. So I think the first piece of feedback is like, it's a question. Does your friend actually not feel anything? Or are they like, I can't celebrate because if I celebrate, I might get disappointed later. And they're kind of thinking this kind of mindset. And then we would say, well, maybe you're not at a level of progress yet where you can, you're this perfect Stoic. And so it's okay to show a little bit of frustration and a little bit of happiness. That's one way of framing the question. Another way of thinking about it in terms of emotion is, so, I mean, the eupathe, the good feelings, they're going to be, the question is always what they're directed towards and what you're judging it as. So I'm allowed to feel joy if I'm feeling joy about my good character. And so if someone wins a national title and you can cry because you're like, man, this is kind of evidence of like, I'm proud of myself, for the work that I did, for the discipline, for the sacrifice. And so you're either cheering or crying out of a recognition of the good character that you've developed that has led to this moment. It's kind of like a moment to plug into. I think that would be another answer. Is you could have a kind of appreciation for your good character. The flip side of that is you should say, you should also probably be just as proud of yourself as if you came second. But I think our kind of narrative brains don't really work that way, right?
Yeah.
We kind of put some more importance on winning. So yeah, two separate points there. One point is that I don't think anybody should be suppressing what they're feeling. And sometimes that happens and it's dangerous. I don't think it's like a Stoic strategy. The Stoic strategy is long-term emotional health, not short-term suppression. And the second is like, yeah, I think you can feel good feelings. It just needs to be about the right thing, not like, oh, I'm going to be famous now, or I can't wait for, all the women to like me because I'm national champ. It has to be like, I'm really proud of myself. The same way you would cheer if your friend won, right? We don't have any sort of, we don't get the same kind of intuition about cheering if your friend wins because you're just very proud of them for the work they put in. You should be able to apply the same thing to yourself.
Yeah, that's helpful. I really like what you do when you, by explaining, think about someone else, think about your kids, think about how you want your kid to live, think about your friend. I think that's so helpful to take an objective look on yourself. I think that's great.
Yeah, the Stoics are also just egalitarian, right? Like we're just all kind of the same, and that's a benefit to saying the good life is similar for all people. It's not this kind of moral relativism or existential. What's good for? It's like no, I should be proud of the good character of my friend. I should be proud of the good character in myself because in every person that's a good thing. So that's kind of a benefit to it.
Yeah. I think about I'll let you go here pretty soon. Just a couple more. Think about practicing Stoic principles, practicing virtue, practicing for virtue in the daily life. Is it ought one choose adversity in order to grow in your virtue and handling situations that are more serious when you all's on the line or something?
Yeah, I think there's two ways of thinking about this. One is the Stoic strategy of voluntary discomfort, which is the choosing of adversity, which is how I look at sport. Like when I look at Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think wrestling and Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I think, well, these are some of the hardest things that I can find in terms of them like simulating combat with some of the lowest consequences. That's kind of I'm like, what's the hardest thing I could do that in practice, actually, if I go and I lose that Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu tournament, I saw, you did the Chicago Open or one of these local ones. it doesn't really matter. It feels big, but it also doesn't really matter. So it's like
Yeah.
you're simulating combat with another person who's out there to get you with none of the consequences. And I think those are great. That's great training ground, right? Seneca talks about you sleeping on the floor. And the Stoic thing is we shouldn't be ascetics all the time, but it's like, every once in a while, spend 2 months and eat some crappy food. And,
Yeah.
because Seneca, right, he's the equivalent of a billionaire at the time, right? He's just reminding himself to kind of live without for a bit. So that's one way of looking at it. And yeah, I think we should do that.
Dude, way more people need to hear this. Like fast for a day, like actually it doesn't have to be forever. You don't have to be just a hard ass all the time. But if you've never fasted, why just do it?
Yeah.
Just make yourself do that. Sleep on the floor for a night. Like just choose adversity here. I love that. I never hear anyone say that. So except my wrestlers who are insane.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, that's the nice thing about sport is it becomes a kind of like habitual part of yourself. I don't know what somebody without sport would do because, you don't want to do that in a way that has consequences. You don't want to go on some hiking trip that you're actually not prepared for and you get hurt or something. So
right.
I love just the safety of it. There's probably other things like I've probably like performance, getting on stage, like facing your social fears is probably another example of something that's like low consequence, but high opportunity to learn. The other thing I would say, which is where I turn, so it's this balancing act, right? So on one hand, voluntary discomfort. On the other hand, the fact that you take cold showers doesn't make you a good person.
Right.
And what I would push back against that is like, if you're going too far in that direction, I would say many of our lives have a lot of hard moments if we just sit and think about them for a moment. Like, being a good partner to your loved one, being a good son to your parents, being a good friend. These are things that we all can do that are all really hard.
Yeah.
And in some ways we can choose, we can say, well, I'd actually rather go and, have a cold shower, lift some heavy weights and avoid those difficulties. So I would say voluntary discomfort, that's great. Lots of things to learn from pushing our bodies in low consequence environments, but also, if anybody's like, oh, I don't have the opportunity to practice my stoicism, I don't have the opportunity to practice my virtue, I think you're probably not looking, carefully enough at your own life, because we all have opportunities to do that. We all have hard decisions to make.
I think that you hit on the hardest things, right? It's actually way easier to go take a really cold shower than to hold your tongue in a business meeting or to not gossip about someone. It's actually way harder or easier to do all the physical things. It's easy. And I know this because a lot of pro athletes are really bad people.
Yeah.
So it's easy to do that. They all do it, but it's really hard to be virtuous. It's very, very hard. I used to have to have note cards on a ring with proverbs from the book of Proverbs in the Bible that said, like, it's better, the man who can rule himself is better than the man who breaks down a entire town, who takes a whole town. That mighty man isn't as good of a man as the one who can rule himself. And all these kind of things where I was such an idiot. I still am, but I'm getting better. Such an idiot where I would just express my opinion all the time. It's like, oh, they really need to hear and it's like blurting it out. It's like, bro, that's so dumb. Have some kind of restraint. Not everyone needs to hear your opinion all the time. So I had to actively like put that in my head before I would go into the meetings. Otherwise I was going to be a brash dummy. And so I think there's one way, there's a lot of different ways that you can practice, but I think you're totally right. Like if you have a beef with your family, like try working on being virtuous to them.
Yeah,
and
that's that's tough, right? Like that makes you uncomfortable. That makes most people uncomfortable, right? Like that's the tough stuff.
Totally, dude. I kept you longer than I should have, but this was fantastic. You got to come back on. We could talk more. We have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, really enjoyed it as always. Yeah, really fun. And then maybe I'll have finished the New Testament by then, and we can dig into some more.
Man. I would love that
some more lessons.
I feel like we're kind of coming the opposite way. Like you're getting into reading the New Testament for the first time. I'm getting into reading some of these more original sources for the first time. So I love comparing and contrasting here.
Can I pick your brain a bit on? I don't know which topics are taboo, which are not. Probably not many for you.
Sure.
Old Testament, literal, metaphorical. Myth. What's kind of the approach to like this?
Depends on the book. Yeah. So
Yeah.
genre criticism. I kind of like genre criticism. So Genesis is a cosmogony, but it's also a poem. I think each one's going to have its own distinctive. So, like in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. I believe that. Did He do it in 7 literal days, or did He do it in 7 figurative days? Well, the Hebrew word yom can mean last Thursday, or it could also mean back in my day. And so, if it's like, hey, back in my day, and you're like, hey, was that day a Thursday? You'd be like, wait, no, you don't understand. No, it wasn't. I'm talking about a period of time. And so Christians debate this one a lot. So was it metaphorical or is it literal? It each one depends, right? So like you have to read it and say, what did the original author intend? I'm not gonna force my own reading on it. I need to know what the original intent was. So I think it's going to depend on the book because each one's different and it has a different audience, different genre. You read Genesis in light of other ancient Near Eastern texts, and you find certain things in there like behemoth and stuff. And you're like, wait, these are like Mesopotamian gods. What are they doing in here? Oh, the author is saying Yahweh is over even the Mesopotamian gods. So that's pretty fascinating. It's pretty cool. And so the more you know about this stuff, the more you see what the author is doing. But then you have wisdom literature that we've come along later and said, oh, this is a wisdom book and this isn't. But the original authors didn't really say that. But you have the Book of Job, which is it's a proto-Platonic dialogue. It's written probably 900 AD. Actually, sorry, that's probably the Book of Proverbs. I don't know. The Book of Job is the oldest book in the Bible. So I don't even know when it's from. But it's a dialogue between one guy and his wise friends about the nature of evil and righteousness and divine retribution as well. And you're like, dude, it reads like a dialogue. It's pretty cool actually. So it's going to depend. I hope that's not a cop out, but it's going to depend on the book. Yeah.
I think it's pretty similar to my Stoicism answers, but it depends. And I think the point there is like something like, it goes pretty deep, just like any other philosophy. Well, like any other, religion or philosophy. So yeah, looking forward to digging into it more, and appreciate you giving me some advice in that regards.
Definitely, man. It'll be great. Before I let you go, can you let people know some places where they can find out more from you?
Yeah. So if you enjoyed our conversation and want to hear more of me talking, I've got a podcast called Stoa Conversations. So Stoic is named after Stoa. That's the porch that the Stoics would hang out on and chat about philosophy. Got a podcast called Stoa Conversations. Parker, you were a guest on that podcast as well, so you can start with that one. And then I've got the Stoa Meditations app. So co-founder and I, Caleb Monteveros, he's the co-host of the podcast as well. We take really seriously, not just, there's the theoretical aspect of Stoicism, and then there's also the practice. And so we made an app that combines the theory and the practice, builds that mindfulness skill so you can better recognize your impressions, gives you some tools to adjudicate on what you're true and what you're false in a Stoic perspective, like we were talking about. So that's an app available, App Store, Google Play, any place like that. And then also starting to write and publish on Substack, which you're posting a link to in the description. So yeah, follow me there, and always happy in any of those places to get a message or a question or a topic people want to see explored in a podcast or anything like that. Just trying to, the mission of this work is more discussion of accurate Stoicism, so like representing Stoicism accurately is the deep philosophy that it is, and then doing that through a lens of actually practicing it and putting it into place in your life. So that's what my work aims at.
That's awesome, man. Well, it's been fantastic. I'm excited to continue this conversation on our next one, and then hopefully I'll see you in November up in Boston. We can get a little rolling. That'd be
really great. Awesome. Get some training in. Awesome.
Definitely. Yeah. All right, folks. That's going to do it for now. This has been Parker's Pensées, and as always, all glory to God.